What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about the Dr650 and the comparisons between the Crf300L. Alright, let's get to it. Alright, let's get into it. So, as a lot of you know, there's a lot of really good bikes out there that you can buy. And it gets to a point where, especially for new riders, hey, how much horsepower do I really need? What kind of bike is actually going to be bulletproof, is going to last long? The engine, the transmission. What bike can I do the least amount of maintenance on and it's still going to run really well? So a lot of you are probably looking at the Crf300L, which is a fantastic bike. It really is. And there's a lot of other bikes in that class as well. But one bike that really popped up for me that I didn't even really know about was the Dr650, the bike I'm on right now. So when I was doing my research, I saw the Dr400, and that bike is so tall. It's actually 2 inches above the Dr, and the Dr is only, I think, 2/10 of an inch bigger than the seat height of the CRF. So I was thinking, well, I can do that. And the funny part is like, you would think the 400 would be a lower seat height than the 600 or 650, Dr650, but no, it's actually 2 inches taller. So I don't know why people aren't talking about the Dr650 more, but for some reason it just kind of got hidden away, and a lot of YouTubers just aren't talking about it. I think a lot of it has to do with it's not fuel injected, and it doesn't have all the modern amenities of most motorcycles nowadays. And yeah, sure, you know, the fuel injected is really nice, especially if you're going up and down mountains and you don't want to rejet your carburetor. But carburetors work just fine. People don't understand that. And plus, with fuel injectors, when those go out, you have to, you know, take your bike down for, you know, a week and a half, 2 weeks before you get a new fuel injector or a sensor or whatever is causing your bike not to run. The Dr650, the carburetors, they can literally be pulled off the bike with a screwdriver and, you know, a ratchet and get the gas tank off. And it doesn't take many tools to actually get everything working again, because all you got to do is clean the carburetor with a little carb spray, and that'll get everything running back to normal. I'm a huge fan of like do-it-yourself kind of maintenance, very, very easy maintenance stuff, and I want to make sure that I'm able to repair my bikes. Kind of like Harleys nowadays. They put in the bus can system for, I think, 2014 Harley and higher, and it almost makes it to the point where a mechanic can't work on any of the Harleys anymore. They have to take it to a shop. And if you know the prices of those Harley dealers, sometimes they're 150, 175 bucks per hour, man. So I don't want to deal with that. I want to be able to fix everything that I can. So I look for bikes where I can maintain and, you know, take care of everything. Full disclosure, I am a mechanic. I'm a mobile motorcycle mechanic. So I know how to fix everything, but nobody wants to work on their bike 24/7, you know. If every week, you know, you got to work on something, it's going to be a pain in the ass after a while. So I look for things that are low maintenance, and you can just ride them, you know. That's the best part of owning a motorcycle, is just riding, getting out there, enjoying nature, getting yourself to a point where you can just take the bike out and you don't have to worry about anything, you know, it just works. And that's why people really flooded toward the Crf300L. But the Dr650 is exactly the same like that. It may not have all the new technology and, you know, the really nice advanced, you know, features of everything. It has a very simplistic face on it. Basically just got its speedometer, turn signals, and your brights. And that's it. Really nothing to it. But you know what? There's nothing to break down either, you know? So it makes the parts very cheap. This bike has been around for a really long time, decades. So parts are everywhere for this bike, and they are dirt cheap. You want to buy a brand new fork for this? It's a couple $100 compared to, being $600 or $700 for a new fork for the CRF. And everybody says the CRF is completely bomb-proof, and I don't think it is yet. I know the Crf300L, that one's a bomb-proof engine. There's a rider called Noralie. She's under the tag name of Itchy Boots on YouTube, and she took that bike from South America all the way up to Alaska. Now, that bike did pretty good that first trip, but now she took it to South Africa, and she's having all sorts of electrical problems with that bike. So maybe the engine's good, but that electronic system, it's not bulletproof, not yet. I think it's going to take at least one more generation before a lot of the quirks and the bugs are kind of filtered out. So, but she's riding that bike really hard. She rode, her first trip, I think it was like 12,500 miles, something like that. So that's a long way to go on a bike in such a short amount of time. And it did relatively good. She was complaining about the rear shock, I think was a huge problem on that, but a lot of it has to do with she loaded that thing up to the gills, man. That thing's a 300, well, it's only a 286cc bike, which a lot of people don't realize. They think it's a 300cc, but no, it's 286. So it's only 36 cc's more than the 250L. And a lot of people like the gearing better in the 250L. So it's kind of a toss-up. So the main reason why I got the Dr650 is kind of a fluke. I went to Honda and I was like, hey, let's get me on the list to get a 300L, because it seemed like the perfect bike. I owned the Crf300L and I loved it. It was a little shy on power on the freeway, and I was thinking, oh, with another 50 cc's, that should be more than enough to keep me happy. But it's not even 50 cc's more, it's only 36. So I kind of was a little bummed by that. So I ended up looking at other bikes, which I'm sure you guys are looking for other bikes too. You probably looked at the Himalayan, which as a motorcycle mechanic, I fixed a lot of Himalayans, and a lot of those are just kind of shit. I'm not saying Royal Enfield's shit or like has, a bad reputation at all, but the Himalayan, it's not reliable to me. I just seen too many bikes come off the showroom floor with just problems, electronic problems. The oil is leaking through the head gasket, like all sorts of stuff that shouldn't be, going on. And a lot of the Royal Enfield maintenance it's not intense, but it's just their parts don't fit together the way that they should. Like we had that head gasket leak on the Royal Enfield Himalayan, and I couldn't get the head off. I took off all the bolts, everything that I needed to take off, and I called up Royal Enfield and I was like, hey, what the hell's going on? And they're like, oh yeah, you need to get like, some 2x4s and this and that. And I was like, well, you shouldn't have to buy a bunch of shit just to get the head off. And they're like, yeah, it's screwed up and a lot of people are having problems, so it's just a bike that I would kind of stay away from. So I was looking at the GS310, and that looks like a pretty cool bike too. Got more than enough horsepower for the freeway. I think it's like 35 horsepower. And the CRF, I think, only has 27 and a half horsepower. And I was like, well, I'll be able to like get on the freeway. Everything will be all like perfect. That's the one thing I noticed about the 250L is when I was on the freeway, it could do long distances, like hour and a half, but you could tell that it was stressing the engine. And it may or may not have worked for a long time, but I don't know, it just felt like I was winding it out like way too hard. And you didn't have any power to pass people. So that was another thing that I was like, well, this isn't really safe. If you need, extra power, say if you got to get in front of a semi or switch lanes real quick, it's not easy to, manipulate traffic with lower power. Now with the Dr650, I can fly on this all day. you can get up to 85 and still have a lot of pull. And I think that was the biggest difference that I realized is 46 horsepower compared to 27. That's like 36% more horsepower. And you may not need that if you're in like a smaller country, you know, but in the US we got pretty, you know, higher speed limits out here. You have to go fast, you know, or it's just dangerous to go slower than, you know, most of the traffic. So anyways, I was checking out the GS310 and I noticed that the parts are really, really expensive, man. Like ignition coils are running for over 200 bucks. So I figured if that bike broke down, it's gonna be a pain in the ass, not only like maintenance wise, but also being very expensive. I am a poor person. I try to like get things on the cheap all day, you know, budget. Then you don't have to work as hard. Save your money, invest it into the right things, and hopefully it'll pay off for you. So the GS310, if I would have found one for a really good price, I might have picked it up, but everybody was asking like $500 under sale price for a new one, for a used one. So I was like, maybe I'll pass. So I ended up picking up this bike, my Dr650. It's going to be a 2009 for 3,500 bucks. And I had to do some work to it. Fork seals were leaking, so I replaced those. That was only, I think, like 60 bucks for the rebuild kit and some other odds and ends. So it was under 100 bucks for sure to replace both the fork seals. And then what else did I have to do? That was about it. I don't think I really had anything major that I needed to change on it. The jets were pretty good for Chattanooga. I'm in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I go up and down mountains. You know, they might not be giant mountains, but you can see them off in the distance. And I never had any problem with it spitting and sputtering and stuff like that. So, the Crf300L. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Honda has such a really good reputation for making bikes that are just bulletproof. And I think, like I said, in a generation, that Crf300 is going to be like the 250L. It's going to be so close to being bulletproof. But right now, I'd give it a little bit. And then plus, you really can't find the 300L right now. Even dealers are charging more than MSRP, which is, I don't think it's quite right. Just because it's limited, they get to make more money and screw you out of, you know, cash. It's not right, so I can't do that. And basically the price of the CRF is going to be pretty similar to the DR. DR might be a little bit more expensive, but it's a proven platform. You really can't go wrong. So yeah, we got a ton of power here. Nothing to ever worry about, more than you'll ever need. So another competitor that I was kind of debating on getting was the KTM 690, which it's going to be a little over an inch from the CRF seat height, and a little bit, I think it's exactly an inch bigger than the Dr650. KTM are really good bikes, man. KTM's a fantastic company. They really make quality products that last. But it is going to be a little bit more pricey as well, I think. Not as pricey as the BMW parts, but it's going to be up there. So really, you can't go wrong with the Crf300 or the Dr650, but I think you have so many options that I wouldn't wait on the 300. I would really probably pick up something that's similar or very close to it. Now me, since I go around to all different types of out and about places, you know, mountains and things that are about 45 minutes to an hour away. So I need the freeway speed. I can't have something that's lingering around at 75, and if I'm bogged down by like having luggage on it, it's really not going to be a good, you know, experience. And I don't think it's going to be good on the bike either. So having that little bit of extra power is fantastic. So I was also checking out the Crf300L, which is another proven bike that does fantastic. It's more roadworthy than it is dirtworthy. It's 100 pounds more than the DR, and I think it's 150 pounds more than the Crf300L. Now, one thing you got to understand, especially being beginner riders, is the CRF is very light. It's, I think, like 310 pounds. Now, you may think like, oh, that's good, and it would be good for off-roading, but I like dual sports. I like things where you can ride to the, you know, dirt and then play around in the dirt, and then you can go home and ride back home. You don't have to trailer it up or anything like that. And when you're on the freeway with a light bike, that thing really whips around. I'm talking a lot. So much so where it actually feels a little scary. When I was on the Crf300L, which I think is like 20 pounds more than the Crf300, which is kind of funny because 300 is a bigger engine. But anyways, I felt a little like weary, you know. I never felt like, oh, I'm like on death's door because I'm riding this bike on the freeway. But it definitely got blown around a lot, to the point where it got a little uncomfortable after a while. It got more annoying than anything. Like, oh God, why am I swaying to the right just because there's a good breeze going around, you know? And on the Dr650, you get a little bit of that, but you don't get a lot. And I can imagine on the KLR, it'll even be better. That's why everybody loves the KLR for going on longer trips. I still don't understand why people ride those 1200 GS models. That thing is so beastly. Like, I know it's a proven bike, it's fantastic, but it's so heavy. Like, if you drop that thing, 70% of people probably won't be able to pick that bike up by themselves. So you have a lot of options. I think the biggest contenders to the Crf300L will definitely be the KTM 690. Another name that it goes under is the Husqvarna 701. So definitely give that bike a check out if you're a little bit of a taller person. I'm 5'10", and this Dr650 fits me perfect. And that KTM 690 was actually only, I think, 2/10 of a, oh no, it was about an inch bigger. So it wasn't way out of line for me, but you could tell that it would have been more comfortable with just a little bit. Like, I like to almost flat foot my bike. I like to have like a little bit more stability, especially if I'm going around rocks and stuff like that. Just makes you feel a little bit more confident on the road. And the 690 is just a little bit taller, not by much, really not by much at all. I don't even think it's an inch, honestly. I know the DRZ400, that one's freaking just ridiculous. It's like 2 inches taller than the Dr650. Yeah, I love me some riding in Chattanooga, man. Lots of really, really cool scenic views everywhere. If you're interested, on my channel, I do have a ton of things when it comes to like museums, and it comes to different parks, different attractions that this place has, which is really nice. Oh no, I think I entered a funeral park. I thought it was just a regular park, but oh well, whatever. Alright, so I'm going to shoot a couple specs at you. So the Dr650 has a 644cc motor. The 300L has a 286cc motor. The gas tanks, the DR is going to have 3.4 gallon versus 2.1 gallon on the CRF. The seat height is going to be 34.8 on the DR versus the CRF, which is going to be 34.6. The horsepower is going to be 43 horsepower on the DR versus 27 horsepower on the CRF, which, like I said earlier, is going to be 36% more horsepower. So you're getting like a third more engine power. That's insane, and it really relates to the higher miles per hour. You're basically like, once you hit like 60 miles per hour, that's when you're going to notice a huge difference between the DR and the CRF. They both have amazing aftermarket parts, so it's not going to be, you know, trouble finding things, and for the most part they're pretty cheap. Let's see here, both have very simplistic engine designs. They're pretty close to being bulletproof. CRF, you know, we yet to see a little bit more on how those hold up long term. The gearing is a 6-speed on the CRF, and it's going to be 5-speed on the Dr650. Now that was one thing that threw me off. I was thinking, oh man, I'm really going to need that 6th gear for the freeway. But since you have so much power, it's literally like a 6th gear on the DR anyways, because the CRF it's not making a big power change. Like the 6th gear on the Crf300 is going to be more of like an overdrive than it is to get more power. And the DR is just, it's got a ton of power all the way through 5th gear. So, you know, freeway power, it's gonna surpass the CRF by miles. If you're gonna think about going on a really long tour and you need a bunch of luggage to pack on the back, the DR is gonna be the way to go. Just like Nora Lee had going on in her Africa trip, South Africa trip for the Crf300L. She's having problems because I know that motor is weighed down, and the electronics are starting to act a little goofy on her. The engine's overheating, so we're starting to see, like, you know, a few flaws kind of shine through now. The CRF gets 70 miles per gallon, which is fantastic. But it is a smaller engine, so obviously you're going to kind of expect that. The DR gets about 50 miles per gallon. And I'm sure there's, you know, you're getting a little more, a little less, depending on how you jet it, what kind of exhaust you're running, what mods you got going on. The ground clearance on both of them, the DR has 10.4 inches and the CRF has 11.2. So that is about, you know, 0.8 of an inch, but it's still less than an inch. So it's not going to be a huge deal. I've seen guys go over huge logs, like giant logs on the Dr650. So they both won't have a problem off-road whatsoever. And they're both very nimble. They can do almost anything you ask of them. As long as you're not dragging it through a lake, or you're like doing weird shit like who is that guy? Ryan from F9, Fortnine. Yeah, that guy killed that KLR, man, in that one video. But anyways, as long as you're not doing goofy shit and, you know, slamming your skid plate down and anything, you should be fine on both bikes. Like I said, the direct competition more likely to the Dr650 would probably be the KTM 690. And that has 74 horsepower. The seat height is going to be 35.8 inches. And that does go under the same name of Husqvarna 701. It's just a different brand using the same engine. So they're both reliable engine. The big thing you want to look for when you're buying a bike, engine, transmission, everything shifts smooth and it's reliable throughout time. So those are the big things. Like I said, the Royal Enfield, really not good quality. GS310, good quality, very high prices. Doing valve checks are a bit of a pain in the butt as well, so it's going to take a little bit longer time for the maintenance. One thing that we didn't talk about is the KTM 390, the Adventure. So that's about 390 pounds, so it is a little bit on the heavier end of the bikes, but the footrests on those are they're like canted, so it almost feels like you're gonna fly over the handlebars. It just really isn't a good design on that, and I think a lot of it has to do with it. It came off the same probably chassis as the 690 Duke or the 390 Duke, and those are meant more for street bikes, more for just like whipping around turns and stuff like that, which those are great bikes, but I really don't think it's one of the better adventure bikes that you can get. But fantastic for the road. And KTM gets not super pricey like BMW, but it gets a little pricey. So those are some things to consider. You do have the KLX300, which is very similar to the 300L in many respects. Same gearing, 6-speed. It's gonna have, they say, a little bit more power at 30 horsepower versus 27. And they're relatively very similar bikes, riding styles. The KLX has a little stiffer suspension. That's one big flaw in the CRF. I guess everybody's talking about soft suspension. But it depends on how big of a rider you are. If you're over 200 pounds, yeah, maybe the suspension might be soft, but it's not going to be soft to a guy that's like me, you know, where I'm like 140, 145 pounds. So, and I think a lot of the Japanese manufacturers, they're kind of citing a lot of their sales of Japanese people, which are very, you know, they're a little shorter, they're a little more lightweight, they're not as heavy set. Some are, but you know, for the most part, I think they think that there's a lot more lighter riders out there. So yeah, I'm not trying to push you toward one way or another. I just kind of, I like to give people insight on, you know, the big things that matter, like highway speed, reliability of the engine, ergonomics. The ergonomics of the Dr650 is fantastic. Wheelie's really easy, has a very strong motor. Maintenance intervals, just like the CRF, are I think 6,000 miles. Valve checks, I think, are at 12,000. So you really can't go wrong with those long service intervals. Granted, I always, you know, change my oil not at 6,000 miles. I change it at 3,000, maybe. No, probably not even that. Probably a little above 2,000. You know, it's kind of like every riding season. I'm going to change my oil depending on how hard I ride it. If I'm riding it a lot off road, on dirt, and things like that, where I feel like it could really use, you know, new oil, because that's the lifeblood of the motorcycle. Sorry, the GoPro cut out because it was getting a little hot there. Anyways, yeah, I didn't want to start a fight on, you know, what bike is better or what bike is more fun. It's just pretty much what the bikes are going to do for you, you know? And I wanted to give you as much details as possible so you can make the best informed decision for yourself. And hopefully I helped out a little bit. I gave you a little bit of knowledge, and you had a chance to, you know, balance out the pros and cons of each bike. And for me, since I travel on the freeway a good amount, you know, like half an hour to an hour, you know, every single adventure that I go on, the DR just fits me, you know, right down to the ground. It just suits me. So I think that that's a better bike for me. The CRF might be a better bike for someone else that maybe needs to get really good gas mileage. Who knows, you know? So definitely comment down below and let me know your experiences with the bikes, because I know during these videos, I always look at the comments on other people's videos to figure out what other people are saying as well. You know, most of the time, because, you know, a lot of people are paid off to say, oh, this for Suzuki, or this for Honda, or this for Kawasaki, you know, and I just try to bring the broad spectrum of all the bikes. And if you guys have any questions, let me know, and give me, you know, all the information that you got so I can understand more about the bikes. There might be some details that I don't know about. So it's always good to get a good forum going and, you know, try to be as respectful as possible. I understand, you know, some bikes are just not people's cup of tea, but, you know, it doesn't mean that it's not someone else's, like, pride and joy. So thanks for sticking with me, and we'll see you on the next vlog. All right, take care, guys. Bye.